Hi everybody, and welcome to this YouTube fly tying tutorial. The pattern that I'm going to be tying for you right now is known as the Josh's White Lightning, which you are looking at. Before I tell you about the fly, I'm going to tell you a little bit about its creator, a gentleman by the name of Josh Williams. Well, Josh is a veteran. Unfortunately, he only has one arm right now. When he got back from battle, he got involved in Project Healing Water and really, fell in love with fly fishing. From that, he developed as a fly tyer, amazingly, and then created this fly. Josh also has a website. I believe it's deaddriftflies.com. Well, talking a little bit more about this fly, Josh was fishing this once in a competition, and an executive from Orvis came up to him and said, "Hey, you're doing really well in that pattern. Maybe you should, try putting it up for suggestion for our catalog. We'll see what happens." Josh did, and sure enough, now his fly is being sold via the Orvis catalog. So congrats, Josh. To tell everybody else a little bit about this pattern, we have some goose biots for the tail and for the legs, just great components. We have some silver tinsel or some silver wire as the ribbing, and then that's ribbed over either orange or purple. Those are the two colors that Josh recommends. You're looking at the orange. I'll be tying with a purple today. We have a little bit of antron coming off the top and a nice peacock head. I've chosen to use a rainbow colored tungsten bead, though Josh does recommend a silver bead at the front. I will recommend that whenever you fish this, fish it on the bottom. I'm going to put a little bit more weight in it, and you'll see that. But don't be afraid to fish it when the water's a little bit off color. Those are two great patterns to fish whenever the water is just slightly stained, so definitely go with that. All right, so I'm going to put the materials up right now if you need to write them down or anything, and then I will get into the actual tying of Josh's White Lightning. Okay, let's get started tying Josh's White Lightning. For starters, I have a hook by Allen Fly Fishing. This is their N202. It's a 3X extra long shank. It just extends this nymph pattern just a little bit. Josh recommends that straight eye, thus I would definitely encourage you to check this hook out. It's intended for hoppers and terrestrials, but I end up tying a lot of flies on it, a lot of patterns on it, especially some soft tackles, and I would encourage you to check it out, maybe for some prince nymphs or for some zug bugs as well. I got a rainbow colored tungsten bead, as I mentioned earlier, though Josh does recommend silver. I'm going to add a little bit of lead wire, some .015 to this pattern. Just going to make a few wraps, pinch it off. Do the same on the other end. And just wrap those around. When you're only dealing with a few wraps, it can be kind of tricky getting this lead wire on there. So I'm just going to pinch around on one side. Do the same on the opposite. Okay. Okay, once I have that lead wire on there, I'm going to just push it back a hair. I'm going to be using just some 6/0 black thread. I pinch the bead up, and I wrap it back, maybe a quarter of the way, somewhere around there. And I just take my thread, extend it around, I'm going to just trap that lead wire in between the bead and where I originally tied on. All right, let me get the rest of the thread out of there. Now, the reason I did that, I want to leave that little gap in the front because that's what I'm going to kind of use as kind of a cheater in a sense whenever I'm tying in my peacock. All right, so let me extend this to the back. All right, for our tail, we're going to be using goose biots. Josh calls for white goose biots on this pattern, so I'm just going to cut off a couple. I'll tie these on one at a time just so you can kind of get an idea how these are getting placed in. I'm going to measure them around. I'm going to measure them so they're about the length of the hook shank. Just get one locked in, a few wraps. Do the same thing with the other one. I'll measure the second one against that first so that I know they are the same length. Okay. Once I have those locked in, I'm going to trim them, but I'm going to trim them so that those butt ends of the goose biots basically line up with my lead. So I can just kind of create a little platform or a little ramp whenever I'm wrapping my dubbing forward. So I'll just get those butt ends locked in place. Go back. Next I'm going to add my oval tinsel. This is what it looks like. This is the brand. Just a little bit of oval tinsel. This is really nice. It gives a little extra shine to this pattern. You can use silver wire or another thin wire, but I like this oval tinsel just because it really just seems to add something. It's a little thicker. Again, just like before, I'm going to tie it in so it will basically extend. Let me back this up a little bit. I was talking while I was tying. So So I'll pull it back so it goes right up to that lead wire. Now I have kind of a ramp leading up for my dubbing. Okay, I got my tail in place, I got everything ready to go, and now it's time to add the dubbing. I'm going to be using an ice dub. It's a UV purple. I had used orange in the previous one that you saw at the beginning of this. I tend to be very generous with my dubbing on this pattern. When I look at how much I have on my thread, I always say, geez, I definitely have too much, and I never seem to. It's very odd, but you don't be afraid to put a generous amount of dubbing on this pattern. I guess that oval tinsel will it will trap it in place, and it will kind of lock it down. Okay, you can see I'm getting closer to that lead wire, and that's, like I mentioned, that's kind of my spacer, so I'll stop right when I get up there. I will advance my oval tinsel. I want to make it so it has about 4 nice ribs showing. Okay. Get my oval tinsel out of there. Alright, next I'm going to go back to the goose biots. And Josh calls for these to be tied on the sides as legs. And whenever you tie these on, you're going to tie them on so that they basically go straight down the side of the body and basically go in the same direction as that tailing fiber. So I'll just turn this up just so I get an idea of where I want it to sit. Once I have it where I want it, I'll just lock it in place with a few wraps. And then do the same thing with the one on the other side. Okay, I don't want to take too many wraps because I don't want to build this up too much, especially since I am using 6/0 thread. All right, the next material that Josh calls for is a little piece of antron going off the top. So I might just grab a clump of some yellow antron, basically just some nylon fibers. I am going to cut a generous piece, and I'll show you why here. So I have a nice generous portion cut out. I probably have a few too many. But whenever I say generous, what I mean is the length is very generous. I have a ton of this stuff, so I'm not afraid of running out. The reason I am a little bit generous is because I want to make sure I have room to trim those butt fibers, all this stuff. So I'm just going to wrap back so I have everything locked in the place where I want it. Then I'll grab my scissors. I'll first make my cut, and you're just going to leave a couple millimeters of this stuff showing. That's all you need. Now you have this big piece to grab onto. Then you're able to really get down there and trim it close and tight. Now, if you don't have a lot of that yellow antron or yellow nylon, you probably can't be as generous as I am. But that is a little tip if you have a bunch of that stuff and you're not afraid to kind of, I don't want to say waste it, but just make everything a little bit easier on you. I'm going to build this up just a hair. I might go back to where I had last tied that stuff in. I have just a couple pieces of peacock herl. I'm going to tie these in. Tips are facing the front. So I'll wrap over them. When I see them going up, then I can trim. Get my hands out of the way. Okay. Now I'm just going to make a few wraps forward. Okay, got that locked in place. One in front. I got a half hitch locking everything in. I can trim those out of the way. Make sure everything looks the way I want it to. It does. Let me get my whip finish in here. And because I use 6/0 thread, I have a little bit of buildup up there, so I'm going to put a little bit of head cement on once this video is finished. But with that said, this is the completed Josh's White Lightning in purple. So I'll just give you the quick 360 look at this pattern. We got those nice white goose biot tails, kind of give you that reminder of the prints. They really kind of take on that that look. We have those nice white goose biots again, but they're coming off the side, very similar to a lot of other nymph patterns. We have that nice little yellow antron coming off the top that just kind of gives something for the fish to see. That really nice peacock head. I mean, you can't go wrong with peacock. And then I like I'd mentioned before, that tungsten bead. It just gives a variety of colors off, and it really just seems to be an attractor for the fish. So with that said, I really do appreciate all of you viewing this fly tying tutorial. Thanks first go out to Josh Williams for for creating this pattern, and for emailing me. He gave me a couple pointers on some of the materials that he does use specifically for this. So if you have a chance, check out his website. I believe it's deaddriftflies.com. Also, thanks go out to Allen Fly Fishing for the use of the N202 hook. You can check that out at allenflyfishing.com. With that said, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them directly on this YouTube page, or you can always email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody, for viewing this tutorial.